everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Our guest today is Karina. Karina, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina, and I am an eclectic witch. I am also an intuitive medium, and I also go by the name Willow, which is actually my author name, since I write poetry and compose songs.
Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You and I had met briefly at All Hallows Market back in October of 2022.
Yes, what a lovely market that was. You were there debuting your book, which was amazing, and we had a very lovely conversation.
I remember. And then you started following me on Instagram. When I decided to start this podcast, you reached out to me and said that you would love to be a guest. And now you're here.
Yes, absolutely. I thought it was such a great opportunity because everyone's got a very interesting story into how they came into their spirituality, whether they're still hiding in their cozy little broom closet or they are out in the open and shining out with a lot of us. And I think this is such a great platform for everyone to just share where they are.
Where are you as far as the broom closet goes?
Well, I am 44 years old now, and I am completely out of the broom closet. It took some time to get here as my journey into this wasn't really the most magical and, sunshiny journey. It was a very difficult journey, although when I look back to it, there are I wouldn't say I have regrets of how I got to where I am today, because it really is about growth, and all of those struggles lift you up to where you're supposed to be, to lift you up to your higher self. So it was definitely a struggle, but I am out in the open. I am in the light, and it feels good to be here.
Tell us how your journey started.
Well, my journey, honestly, it's a very sad one. It started when I was age 11. I had gone through a lot of very bad abuse at the hands of very awful people. And when I say abuse, it really wasn't the type of like physical abuse. It was the kind of physical abuse, sexual abuse that no child at 11 should ever encounter. And in that abuse, a lot of memories of other abuse had started to resurface from when I was younger. And so all of that kind of coming to this boiling point, and then starting out in middle school at the same time, you went from being a child in elementary school to all of a sudden you're in this preteen phase. And I was a very awkward child at the time, and I faced a lot of bullying. I just had a lot of negative confrontations with other children my age. And while I was dealing with that, I was also dealing with all of the abuse. Now, back in my time, counseling wasn't really offered for kids. When something like that happened, you were just kind of expected to, well, why did you go there? And why did you do that? And why did you talk to them? It was more like the victim, which was myself, was being blamed for what had happened to me. And so I was supposed to just kind of push it under the rug, and take the punishment of going somewhere where I shouldn't have gone, befriending people I shouldn't have befriended. And so I kind of learned to blame myself for what happened. But what was really going on inside of me is that there was a voice saying, this is not your fault. When you're 11, you don't know how to kind of think through your thoughts. You're still so young, and psychologically you're not even fully developed yet. Everything started to turn to a very deep state of depression. I was not only dealing with being bullied on a daily basis, I was dealing with what had happened to me in the past. And I started to kind of disconnect from everything and really, really just not wanting to be around anybody. I didn't want to talk to my parents. I really just I didn't want to be around, like, physically. I wanted to unalive myself and not have to wake up. And every day that I woke up, I just was thinking, well, here's another day I've got to face my demons again and blame myself for what happened to me and deal with all these kids that are bullying me. I don't know how to handle this. And I started acting out. I started having these temper tantrums and having these violent outbursts and finding all kinds of ways not to go to school. And every time I told my parents, what was happening, they're like, well, maybe you said something or maybe you looked at someone the wrong way. So again, I was being blamed for what was happening to me. And so I never, and I love my parents so much, and they did the very best they could to raise me. But thinking back, not once did they ever asked, well, why did that happen to you? It was always, maybe you did something. Maybe you said something. Maybe you looked a certain way. And I was very used to that pattern. Every time something happened to me that didn't make me feel good about myself, I learned to blame myself. I learned to say, well, maybe it is you. Months and months went by, and I was having more and more emotional, violent outbursts, till finally my mom said, I think we might need to take her to a doctor. Maybe she needs to talk to someone. Maybe she's acting out. And I went from one psychiatrist to the other, from one psychologist to the other. I was put on antipsychotic medication. It made me a complete zombie, but that wasn't even working. I was still having violent outbursts. I did manage in the midst of that to try to unalive myself and was taken to the hospital, and I was revived. And then I was on heavy watch from that point on. I was taken out of school and just basically staying home. I was taken off my antipsychotic meds because they made me sick. I had some good days, but I had more bad days, and the violent outbursts just kept happening. They wouldn't stop. I got to a point, in a nutshell, where I just said, I don't even know why I'm going through this. I hate myself. I hate everybody. I don't even want to be around. Like, why am I alive? If all this bad stuff is happening to me and all these people are doing all these things to me, why am I even alive for this? Like, someone needs to just take my life from me now so I don't have to do this. And I went into my mom's room and locked the door, sat in the dark, and I willed for something bad to happen to me. I sat there and went into a meditative state and prayed and prayed and begged, I want something bad to happen. I want something dark to happen to me. If there are evil forces out there, if there is negative energy out there, something, I want it to happen. I am here. I am ready for it. Come my way. And soon after that, a shift in me happened. I became more violent. I became more aggressive. There were moments where I felt that I was trapped in my body. There is an incident that happened with my family that will bring us to this other part of the story where I supposedly had, and I say supposedly because I don't recall this, but my parents woke up to my sister crying. And when they came out, I had a knife to my sister. And my parents said that I was holding it to her and I wanted to hurt her. And when they took the knife from my hand, my dad, who was 200 something pounds at the time. I was probably maybe 90 pounds. I was really young. I lifted my dad and threw him across the room. And then I did the same to my mother. And both my parents had to restrain me. And from what they remember, when they were holding me down, my eyes were so dark. I didn't look like their daughter anymore.
Do you remember any of this?
I don't. I always remember being angry, but I also remember feeling trapped. Because we talk about it very often during that time. They always say, hey, when you were going through that, what do you remember? I go, I just remember being trapped. I remember like I was behind myself almost, like I was there, but I wasn't there. It was almost like I was watching from the back, but I also remember feeling very angry. My parents had no idea what to do. They were desperate. I had so many different doctors look at me, and they all concluded with all the testing, there's really nothing to be causing this psychosis. She's fine. I had other doctors say she doesn't even need to be on antipsychotics. I mean, yes, she's having violent outbursts, but we cannot figure out medically with all the testing why this is happening. I mean, I had my brain scanned. I had a lot of testing done, and a lot. And when I say a lot, I'm sure I had the kind of testing that anybody would have done when these violent outbursts are happening. So they even thought maybe it's a tumor, maybe something's going on neurologically to be causing that. But that wasn't even it. And so this is where it gets really interesting. Now, my parents, I grew up on Guam, tiny little island, very, very strong in our Catholic faith. My parents were devout Catholics, but they weren't, like we didn't go to church every day, but they were devout. But they were also very skeptic of the other things. Guam is very rich in its culture when it comes to medicinal medicine, the island spirits. And we have our own doctors on Guam. And our witch doctors on Guam, if you're a male, you're called a surahanu. And if you're a female, you're called a surahana. And they are basically our island witches. And my dad's cousin just casually said, well, look, you've taken her to every doctor you possibly can. You're about to send her to a hospital in Germany, which is way across the world. Have you ever thought about maybe taking her to the witch doctor? And my dad looked at his cousin and he said, we don't believe in that. He's like, well, what else are you going to do?
It was like a last resort.
It was a last resort. And, my dad's cousin said to him, you said it yourself. You don't feel like you're looking at your daughter when you see her. She looks like someone else. How do you explain her superhuman strength? Why does she have black in her eyes and all of a sudden doesn't recall when these things are happening? And so my dad said, okay, you know what? I think he did it honestly to humor his cousin so he would get off his back. But I do remember the day that my parents took me. I was out of school for some time, and my mom casually just walked in and said, hey, come take a ride with me and Daddy. And I willingly went. I said, okay, do I have time to do my makeup? She goes, no, you're just going to sit in the car. It's going to be fine. Daddy just wants to, go talk to his friend about a fishing rod. And I went willingly. But it was when we got to the house where the energy shifted. I remember sitting in the car, and my parents got down and they went into a house. And then my mom came back shortly after. And she said, hey, Daddy's friend wants to talk to you for a little bit. And I said, why? I was like, I don't want to talk to Daddy's friend. I don't even know him. She goes, well, do you think maybe you could just come down for a little bit and just maybe have a little talk with him? And then I started to get very angry. And I almost felt like my body was being weighted down to the car. So even if I wanted to go, something was holding me back from going. And I started throwing the biggest fit in the back of the car, just screaming. I know I screamed a lot of obscenities to my mom and said a lot of horrible things, which was the normal with me. If I wasn't talking calm like I am now, I was usually just awful. And my mom walked away, and then this man started walking down the driveway, and he had smoke in his hand. I'm assuming maybe he had some sage, he had something. and he was smoking the entire car, and he came over to where I was, and he opened up the door, and he held his hand, and he said, "Come with me." And all of a sudden, my body just lifted. I didn't feel weighted down anymore. I just kind of got up. Mind you, I'm scared of people because things have happened. So it's not usual for me to just trust someone I have never met, especially men. I have had so much horrible experiences. So if a strange man is coming to me saying, "Come with me," I'm not going to go. But something about him, I wasn't scared. And I willingly went, and we walked right up to the porch, and we sat down, and he said, "Don't be scared." Because all I want to do is just talk to you for a little bit, and I just want to take a look at you. He's like, "If you can, just, take a couple of deep breaths and just look into my eyes." I watched this man's eyes. I watched his pupils dilate right in front of me. And when you're a child and you're witnessing something like that, you're like, what is happening? And all I did was just look at him, but I felt so peaceful. And we just sat there for a while. We barely said anything. And all he said was, "Everything's going to be okay. I'm going to go talk to your parents." And as he walked away from me, I just sat there. And that was probably the first time in a very long time that I actually felt peace. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel like I wanted to hurt someone or hurt myself. I just felt happy and calm. I even thought to myself, like, why do I feel like this right now? What was in that smoke? And he went in and spoke to my parents, and then my mom and dad came and got me in the car, and we started driving home. And I said, "What was that? Who was that man? Why did his eyes do that weird thing?" And my mom said, "I'm going to need you to be patient. We have to wait for your sisters to come home because we have to all talk about this as a family together. Those are our instructions." And so we came home, and it was probably maybe like not even an hour before my sisters got home from school. And our parents sat us down, and they said, "We need to have a very serious talk." And I remember my mom saying, "This is going to sound crazy, but crazy is kind of our theme in this household. So maybe it won't be crazy to you guys." And they just basically explained to my sisters, "Well, we took your sister to see a witch doctor, and he is 100% sure that a very evil spirit has invaded your sister's body, that she has got a very strong male spirit who is basically claiming her as his. And he is the one that is making her strong, making her violent, making her turn against everybody, and doing all of this." And of course, my sisters and myself, we kind of laughed, like, okay, maybe you guys. And the only reason why we had that reaction is because our parents raised us not really talking about that stuff. But that stuff is so rich on our island. Before anyone even sees a medical doctor, they seek the local witch doctor first for medicinal healing, and spiritual healing, and just anything having to do with that sort. When our mom says, "No, listen, this is what's going on. And if we don't take care of it now, we're going to lose your sister forever because he wants her."
Did the witch doctor take care of it that day? Or did you have to go back to him again?
This is where it gets really interesting. As we sat there and talked about it, we said, "So what's going to happen?" And she said, my mother goes, "Well, he saw the man as he was looking at you, and he was standing behind you with a very like claiming you, like almost like she's mine. And he basically told the spirit, I'm going to meet with you tonight and we're going to settle this. And so he told my parents, tonight I want all of you to sleep in the same room together because you are united as a family. And I'm going to go face to face with this spirit. And we're going to, he's going to do what he does. Like, he never really explained what exactly he was going to do, but he just said, you sleep together as a family, you unite as a family. If you are religious, take out your religious artifacts, pray, whatever it is to show your family unity, but you must be together tonight because I will be with that spirit tonight. And he warned my parents. He goes, the spirit knows because I saw him today. So he is going to do everything he can to be aggressive towards your daughter or even aggressive towards you. So at any moment during the night, if something happens, she needs to say these things. And if you hear the sound of crickets, that means I am there and I am protecting you. And that's where we just went, okay, this is getting out of control. Like, you know, it's really hard when you're a kid, when you're a teenager and you're hearing your parents who say stuff like this. It almost sounds like it's straight out of a movie, like they're pitching a movie, you know, but of course there's that part of you where you're thinking, well, maybe this could be true. Let's not take our chances. We're all going to feel so silly tomorrow morning for believing in this. And Karina's just going to go on to be crazy as usual until who knows what. But we sure did all go into the same bedroom because we didn't want to take our chances. We turned off the lights and my mom slept with me on my twin bed. And my dad was just on the floor and then my sister's across the way on another bed. And there was a lot of anxiety before we went to bed. And my middle sister kept saying, what if something happens? And my mom said, it's going to be fine. We'll pray if we have to. If something happens, Karina, you'll need to call on him. And I don't even remember how we fell asleep, but we did. But in the middle of the night, I had my right arm up over my head. And all of a sudden, something yanked my arm and shook my arm. And it was so violent and I could really see the fingers, but I don't see a hand, but I could see where I'm being grabbed and my arm just shook. And I mean, the shaking was so aggressive that it woke my mom up. And of course I was screaming and crying. And as my mom woke up, my right leg was pushed down and shook really hard. And that's when everything just broke loose. I started freaking out. My whole body was shaking. My sisters were in a panic. My dad was freaking out. And there was so much commotion. And my mom was the only one who was calm. And she just said, you need to call on him. You need to call on him right now. And I was like, I don't know what to say. What am I supposed to say again? And I was supposed to say his name, please protect me, and say it 3 times. And I said it 3 times. And it was almost like someone opened up 1,000 cages of crickets and the whole room just filled up with crickets. We couldn't see them, but we could hear them. We had a very small bedroom and it was air conditioned and we could just hear the crickets and everything just all of a sudden the energy in the room shifted. Everything felt calm, but we didn't sleep for the rest of the night. We stayed up until the morning and just looked at each other and said, my God, this happened. And we were instructed to go see him the very next day. And as soon as we pulled up to his house, like I didn't need any coercing to go down and speak to him. As soon as the car stopped, I ran. I ran and said, what was that?
What was it?
And he said, he goes, I saw the spirit. He is not going to bother you anymore. He's like, but we have to have a serious talk. He was also a medicinal witch, and so he had tinctures. And so I had a potion that I was to put on my body every time I walk out, anytime I leave the house to protect me. And he told my parents, he goes, this wasn't by chance that it happened to your daughter. She manifested it, but your daughter is a medium. Your daughter is she's very spiritual. In fact, she could be what I am. She can call on these spirits, but if she's doing it the wrong way, and they always say there is no right or wrong way, but with us witches, we always want to always seek the most peaceful, loving energy, but you can also manifest some very dark energy. You can manifest some very dark things to happen. And that is how I truly learned about the manifestation, like the power of manifestation, and learned that all of this happened because I manifested it, but it was also just because at the time, my entire being was so down. I was going through so much emotionally, so much psychologically that when your spirit is so low, you're essentially operating on a very, very low vibration. So of course your mind is not going to be having positive thoughts. Your mind is not going to be thinking of kindness and love and light. You're just thinking of everything opposite of what that is. That is truly how I came into my spirituality. And then a lot of stories started to surface up when this happened. And my mom said, well, we kind of knew that you always had that because when you were younger, you would always go into the jungle and you would talk to things, but we didn't know who you were talking to. But you had friends and you were always comfortable being alone in the woods.
This happened when you were in middle school, and now you're 44 years old. How has this changed your life since then?
Oh gosh, well, when I went through that event, I tried so hard to learn about what it is to be a healer. I tried so hard to learn about what it is to be, sensitive to those energies, to be a healer, to be a medium, because I would always see, feel, and hear things. People would appear to me all the time. And I would always receive messages and I would always see things. That whole experience really woke me up spiritually. It was a very traumatic event, but it was almost like someone turned the light on. And then it was just, I was seeing one spirit to the other, to the other. I was knowing things that would happen before they happened. It was always being very spot on. But growing up on a tiny island that is so deeply rooted in their faith, even though the spiritual healers and the witch doctors are such a big part of our history, I had no one to talk to. I had no one to really learn from or to even ask questions. If you went into a library, it was really hard to even find books. And I didn't even know what to search. We didn't have the World Wide Web at the time where you could just do a quick Google search. And then when you tried to speak to someone about it, they would look at you like you're crazy. And I was all like, well, if you want to know crazy, you should hear how I got here. My family has always been open.
You did not have a mentor there in Guam?
I did not have a mentor. I tried so hard to search for a mentor. I was really just going into it blindfolded and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what protecting yourself is because I was so open and I was seeing and hearing and feeling so many things. And sometimes I would see things that I didn't want to see and I was privy to things that I didn't want to be privy to. I've been run out of a house at one point, just going to a barbecue and then going into the bathroom and just something really, really bad just basically yelled, get out. And I was facing things like this and not even knowing why is this happening? There's no 101 on how to do this. I had no idea. We had one metaphysical store, but she wasn't really helpful either. I just said to her, hey, I'm very new to this. I don't even know what to call myself, but I had a very scary, traumatic, supernatural experience. And now I am experiencing all these things and I need protection. I'm not very religious, so I don't carry a rosary, although my parents are, but it doesn't make me feel safe. What can I do? And the only thing she suggested was, well, maybe you need an amulet to protect yourself. She's like, is there a symbol that maybe you're very drawn to? And I said, well, I've always liked the pentacle. It's a very misunderstood symbol, but I love what it stands for. I go, that I know because I read about that. And I think I love how it embodies everything. And she goes, okay, then the amulet chose you. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't even know how old I was at the time. And so I remember getting my very first amulet and I go, so what do I do with it? And she said, well, you could charge it with your energy. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, you could hold it in your hand and maybe imagine a beautiful white light and just imagine it protecting it. Go, oh, okay. Maybe imagining myself inside of the pentacle, in the middle, and I'm protected by the elements and spirits. She goes, yeah. I was like, I can do that. From then, I just, always had my pentacle as my amulet. I kind of figured on my own well, maybe I need to be very careful on what I allow to enter my space and maybe have boundaries. Like I really was just winging it because it was crazy. And people would ask me, hey, when you see dead people, what is it like? I go, oh, it's like looking at me and you. I go, but I know that they're not of this realm. I was like, I don't see a shadowy figure or like a ghostly figure, someone in a white sheet. I go, I see a person. They speak to me and they always speak to me on my right. I get a lot of my intuitive messages on my right. I really just started learning about my gifts on my own. I learned that I have the gift of psychometry and I can pick up objects and feel the energies. I can tell you all about it. I always tell people, like, you got to catch me off guard because I don't want my intuition to be influenced. So just get me on an off day and just hand it to me. I also really love to do energy walks through homes, and I can tell you a lot about your home if your home is basically occupied, I would say, if you've got spirits in there. I also channel a lot of messages from loved ones that have passed.
Is that a service you provide now for people?
So it's not a service that I get paid for. Right now, I'm just called to do it for friends and family and anyone that comes across my way. It's just kind of what feels right to me. If somebody asks a question or wants to reach out to someone or anything like that. I've been tested a few times, which I love because a lot of my friends have, in conversation we spoke about it. And my favorite one was a friend of mine who bought a very, very old house and she told nobody about it. And one day after closing, she decided to have a kind of like a little housewarming and she invited everybody over. And my husband was deployed at the time. And we were stationed in Fort Drum, New York at the time. She bought a very old house, and there's lots of old houses. The place, Fort Drum, is full of history.
It is. We were stationed there when I was in graduate school.
Oh, awesome. Yes. I just remembered before I left with the kids, I was like, I need to protect my children for some reason. I don't know where I'm going, but I need to protect them. And I know my guides are always speaking to me. So whenever I'm having these internal conversations, it's really me and my guides talking. And I was like, gotcha, I will protect them. I remember coming down off the car and I got the kids, got the baby out of the car seat. And I was just blessing all three of my kids and just putting a loving protection over them. And then we came into the house and she kind of ushered me through the front door. And then she stopped and she goes, okay. She goes, so this is my house. She goes, but you probably know why I asked you to come other than to celebrate us buying this house. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm already feeling a lot of stuff. She's like, yeah. She goes, I didn't want to tell you because I wanted you to experience it for the first time. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, if you want, you can take the kids and I'm just going to do my thing. Then I really still didn't know like how I did things. I just kind of go with where the energy leads me and what feels right.
What was the energy you sensed?
It was very sad energy, actually, because upon walking into the house, I already just felt so much sorrow. I went from being in this protective mode because I've got my children there and protecting myself to also being like, wow, just looking at the house, I'm like, this is a very old house. But why is it so sad? This should be a joyous occasion because she probably bought a house that's in the history books or, this is something big to be happy for, but I felt sad. I walked around the entire house and I usually like to start like at the furthest part of the house before I come back to the front. And I really just kind of go where everything leads me. And there were so many hidden passages into the house, cute little like nooks and crannies and everything. And everything felt very, very normal. Just, it smelled like an old house, but I felt nothing. It was just the normal house up until I got back up to the front where it had a beautiful grand staircase on both sides overlooking like a foyer. At that part of the house, it's very cold. The whole other part of the house was just warm and normal, but that particular part of the house just had a very cold feeling. And as I walked up the stairs, I was guided to go right up to the middle where both staircases meet. And then that's where I felt everything. I was brought right up to the middle of the stairs, And I said, okay. And then I looked to my left and then I saw the lady. And I looked at her and I said, hi. And then she looked at me and then we looked down. And then I said, your baby died. Your baby fell. Your baby fell from this. And she would look at me and then she would look down. And I said, you have to rest. Your baby's waiting for you. And she just kind of disappeared. And my friend Vera came back and I said, okay. It's like, do you want me to tell you what I saw? She goes, yeah. And I go, well, every part of your house is fine. But when you come to this particular side, there is a lady ghost here, a lady spirit. And she's very sad. And she keeps looking down and she's crying. I sense a child spirit here, a baby, a very young baby. And I said, and I spoke with her and she confirmed that her baby died. And she also confirmed that she threw herself from these stairs.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
She goes, that's the story of the house.
She knew the story.
She knew the story. You know, not that she doubted me, but she just wanted to see, because we've had many conversations of just energies, and she's seen me read objects and everything, or just kind of have like intuitions on things. But as soon as we finished that conversation, she goes, that's the story. That's the story. She goes, well, what do I do? And I said, well, I just told the lady that her baby's waiting for her on the other side where it's happy and beautiful. That she doesn't need to wait for her baby here. Her baby's over the rainbow, somewhere beautiful. She goes, we would feel her kind of walking back and forth and we would hear little footsteps and then the footsteps stop. I go, because she keeps coming back to this very spot where her baby fell. That was when, you always have this, am I crazy? But then when things happen and other people confirm it and there is hard evidence to prove it, you're like, geez, this is really happening. Looking back on those days where I didn't really have a spiritual community, I didn't have any mentors to where I'm at today, it took a long time to get here.
So tell me where you are today.
Today, honestly, I still do a lot of mediumship with lots of friends and family, sometimes strangers, because every now and then I'll get a message and I'll be sitting next to somebody and I have no choice but to say, hi, this is going to sound really crazy, but I have a message for you. If this makes you feel uncomfortable, I understand. And then they would say what I'm like, your mom wants me to tell you that she's always with you and that you need to stop doing such and such and such. And the person would just laugh. And it doesn't happen all the time because I also set boundaries now because it's very draining. When I am in my mediumship, intuitively receiving messages, it takes a lot out of me as well. Really learning how to set boundaries and just kind of, it's almost like you're telling your other friends who are on the other side, like, time out. I need a break. Like there's a time and place that we can do this, but I also need to do the other human things. I need to go to work. I need to be a mother. I need to be a wife. But I do read oracle cards for friends and family. And every now and then I'll get a random stranger that I'll read for. But that's where I'm at today. I'm completely out in the open. I love telling people my story. I love that I'm a witch. I am still learning. And that is something that I will always tell people. You will never stop learning about your gifts. You will never stop learning about your craft. And there is this huge community out there. So I love learning from everybody because I consider myself an eclectic witch. I pull my practice from everything and make it my own.
And you probably have noticed over the years how our community is growing.
Yes.
So many people are out in the open, and we have so many metaphysical stores now than when you were in middle school.
Yes, and when I look back to it now, I always think, oh my gosh, where were all these places? But at the same time, I also understand that my path and my spiritual journey happened the way it was supposed to. I always try to remember, because I remember I was kind of having that conversation, and one of my guys was all like, hey, don't knock how you were raised. Because they raised me, I even heard, we did the best we can to try and help you, but you wouldn't listen. Like, it's my guides and I have a very funny relationship because it's almost like a very sarcastic relationship where we joke a lot, where they're always kind of rolling their eyes. So of course, when I see a lot of those funny like memes where someone says, my guides rolling their eyes when they try to give me advice, I'm like, oh yeah, those are mine. I was like, I try to. It's almost like I'm the child sometimes, and they're like the parental part of my spiritual journey saying, you need to listen, you need to stop, pause, and listen. I'm like, okay. I think it really is great how it really is evolving and how it's growing. And I know there's also a lot of push towards that, where people are like, oh, they're just influenced. And I said, hey, if someone is feeling spiritually called to reach into that side, like, let them be.
That's right.
Let them be, because I believe there's a witch in everybody. We were born of the earth, and so we have magic within us. Like, there's no discriminating here. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, whatever it is that you do. There's magic within you. The fact that you're alive is magical. I don't discriminate. I love it whenever I meet somebody who is very curious and very new to it. And, they're scared to ask questions. They're like, I'm kind of scared to do this. I'm like, don't be scared. Just do what comes natural for you and make it your own. Get as much information as you possibly can. If you're on a platform and things start to get really heavy and crazy, then just politely excuse yourself from that platform, because we have to bring that awareness where we want to keep on and continue building our community. And we also want to make sure that we're supporting our community, especially for a lot of us who are still kind of in the shadows, not ready to come out yet. We want to really carefully just kind of nurture them and nurture their magical gifts and understand, like, we all started somewhere. That's right. And we have to always remember where we came from. I mean, it's funny because some people will say, gosh, I grew up rough, but I never really talk about that part of my life. I talk mostly about my spiritual journey and how I grew, because it had such a profound effect on who I am today. It was the story I shared with you today is just in a nutshell. It was a very powerful story that my middle sister actually wrote about it in her dissertation in theology while she was in college, because she experienced the brunt of it. It's really sad because back then, you had, what was it, like a floppy disk and even a typewriter. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, you wouldn't happen to have that report you did when you went to Marquette University? She's just like, oh, sis, I did that on a typewriter.
Does she have a hard copy of it?
She may or may not. We're hoping we played around with the idea of reaching out to Marquette University in Milwaukee, because the story was actually very big, and it was titled Living with the Devil. It blew her theology professor away. Everybody talked about it, and I'm going to manifest it. I said to her, you know what? It'll happen. That story that you wrote will come into our hands when it's supposed to, because it's very helpful for a lot of people, and that's honestly what I really want people to understand, that when your vibration is so low, you have to be really careful of the influences that are around, just waiting to kind of, it's almost like what would be the word? Your vibration is so low, and I don't want to say that you're easily influenced or easily manipulated, but there are these energies out there that want to lower your vibration. And, it's really important for people to really, like, whether you're in therapy, whatever form of therapy that you use. I had no therapy back then. I was in a very dark place, and I learned that I manifested something really awful.
You would be a very good mentor for those just entering the craft.
Yes. Oh yeah, because we could have some really good conversations. Really just not even knowing, and then having everything just all of a sudden thrown at you. It's almost like somebody turned on my lights, and then all the spirits were like, me, I have something to say. it's very scary when you're very young and then you can't really talk to a lot of people. I did have my family, and obviously my family supported me and they believed me because they experienced it. It really opened the doors for the rest of my family because my nieces are also very gifted. My children are gifted. We even have a family spirit that watches over us. And I said to him, "Hey, where were you when all that was happening to me?" I was like, or was this part of my journey? Was I really supposed to go through this? Because I was like, you said you're a protector of our family. I'm like, where were you, sir?
Karina, this has been an informative interview, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. And I am so appreciative that I had this opportunity, and to all the baby witches out there and anybody that is, starting their journey, I'm here for you.
How can they find you?
I only have one social media platform because as an empath, I cannot handle so much. So you could find me on Instagram at Under a Weeping Willow Tree.
And I'll put that in the episode notes.
Yeah, so you could reach out to me if you have any questions, especially if you're starting out, and we can talk about, your journey and like where you're heading to, what your interests are. I mean, my practice involves a lot of different things. I mean, I love fire. I work mostly with fire, but, I do a lot of mediumship, when it happens, when I'm called to.
Karina can be found on Instagram at Under a Weeping Willow Tree.
Yes, my favorite tree.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.